Thank you so very much for spending an evening with us here in downtown Pueblo. My name is Russell DeSalvo. I'm President and CEO of PuebloPlex. And on behalf of the PuebloPlex Board of Directors, we want to thank you for being here this evening to participate in the very first public outreach meeting relating to the redevelopment of the soon-to-be former Pueblo Chemical Depot. Our organization, PuebloPlex, has received a grant from the Department of Defense to put together an extremely detailed and vigorous redevelopment plan for approximately 16,000 acres at the Pueblo Chemical Depot. We have engaged Matrix Design Group, which is a professional engineering and planning firm, to help the community and help us put this new plan together. So tonight we will be sharing with you some information about the project, the scope and scale of the project, asking for ideas from you about the future uses or what the community might like to see at the Pueblo Chemical Depot in the future. And so we will have other planning sessions as the year progresses, but this is the very first one. So again, I just really want to thank you for taking the time to outreach with us and to interact with our planners. At this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Dan Schneff. He is the President and CEO of Matrix Design Group, and we'll get the evening started. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Russell. I just want to say thanks to everybody again. I want to reiterate what Russell had just said about you taking time off to help us. Before we get started, I just want to put a few things down on out here for you all to understand where we're at and where we're going. And then Celeste and I will run you through a presentation that puts everybody on a level playing field. What I do start is we've got a very talented group of individuals and companies who've been working with us on this project, many of whom are from the area. Could I have the Matrix team please stand up if you're part of Matrix or part of the Matrix team doing this work? And I want to recognize these folks because we spent the last 4 to 5 months doing a lot of vigorous work trying to understand the project and its complexities. And we're in a position today to start getting some input from you all as we go forward with the planning process. Thank you. Could we go to the first slide? You know, oftentimes when we do these programs and projects, the most difficult part is really getting a local flair. And so we're going to spend time doing opportunities and constraints analysis, SWOT analysis, and we're going to look at what we think is important. But what really comes out of the process that results in a good plan is what the local community thinks as it relates to this project. And we're going to bring to bear a lot of things: market data, environmental constraints, infrastructure, transportation, land use. And we're going to help guide those questions that need to be asked. And tonight is the first step in terms of public participation, as Russell had said, and getting to the bottom line on what the community thinks and feels about this program as it goes forward. So today what we're going to go through is, I just did some team introductions. We didn't do them specifically. You'll have an opportunity to participate as the night goes on. And I feel free to ask your team lead at your table what they do for the project, who they are, and how they might influence the project going forward. You'll get a personal taste for that as we go on. The project overview, Celeste is going to spend some time in a minute here, my project manager, going through where we've been and where we're going. We're going to spend a little bit of time on inventory and analysis, and like I said, we've been in most of the facilities. I don't know where poor Chad is. Chad led many teams of engineers and planners and architects and environmental leads through all the facilities, so he's got a really good handle on that, and we're going to show you what we learned. We're going to go through site opportunities and constraints from an engineering perspective and otherwise. Then we have a unique opportunity to ask you some important questions as it relates to this project. And on your table you'll see that you've got these clickers. We're going to have you participate in answering those questions, and it'll give us some great feedback and data. We're going to go through a planning exercise on a table-by-table basis where you're actually going to have the opportunity to look at the opportunities and constraints we've presented and then give us your great ideas about how the plan might want to come out. And last, we're going to talk about next steps. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Celeste Werner, who's the lead planner for the project, and she's going to walk you through some more.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Very excited to be here to present what we've done to date so far. Let me know if you can't hear me. So first, as we go forward, we like to talk about what is a redevelopment plan. Well, the first thing is it's a collaborative planning effort that it's involving all of the community, the public, the leaders, the stakeholders, and all of your partners within the region. And so in this collaborative effort, it's a transparent process. And as we move forward, we're going to be developing a plan for the former Pueblo Chemical Depot. Many of you do know that the Pueblo Chemical Depot was stood up back in 1942. So many of the facilities, the structures, and the infrastructure is a little dated. And back in 1988, it went through a BRAC in a realignment. And then again in 2005, it went through a closure, another BRAC. And here we are today. As we get closer to, hopefully, the transition or the transfer of the land to PuebloPlex, the local redevelopment authority, the authority that is guiding this plan as we move forward. And it's guiding the plan, but with your guidance as well, as an integral part of the project. The unique part of this reuse plan or redevelopment plan is that we're not approaching it as a closure. We're approaching this plan as a new startup, a new business startup. And that's really important because it is the opportunity to take a vision, and sometimes it's very hard to look into the future. You know, we have PuebloPlex 15 miles to the east of the center core of the city here in Pueblo, and sometimes to visualize what will it look like 20 to 50 years may be difficult, and it's going to be our job to assist in going forward and working and helping that vision become a realistic plan.
Yeah, Celeste, I just wanted to add that through doing many of these over the years, she mentioned the fact that we're looking at this as a business opportunity. We found that plans that get executed as a planning exercise without a focus on the business activities that will result in job creation and offshoot economics often fail. And one of the key points that we try to focus on is the integration of the business plan as we go through the planning activities, as Celeste has mentioned.
Right, and one of the main goals is to make sure we continue to create new jobs for the community, attract and retain the talent that's currently here, and bring new skill sets to the region. And the one thing we want to really highlight is it's not a plan that's going to be one that's in a competitive mode with the opportunities, the business opportunities within the county existing as well as the city, but complementary in nature. So we will definitely do our best there as well. Highest and best land use, we'll be focused on that. The key is the implementation strategy. You can have a great plan, but unless you have a plan that has steps and actions to implement that plan in a phased manner, one that is market-based and one that is fiscally sound and realistic, it won't happen. So we are also going to be integrating that strategy, that implementation strategy, after we develop the overall preferred redevelopment plan. So why is this plan important to you? Many of you, it may be difficult because it's so far away, but it actually is part of Pueblo, the community of Pueblo. It has been for many years. It's been an economic engine for years, and it used to be the core area where the majority of the jobs were, and everybody lived in the city of Pueblo and the surrounding county area here. So it's nothing new. It is something that you should be treasured. It's truly a gem for future opportunities. And another key takeaway is besides creating the jobs, is it's called a multiplier effect. What we call a multiplier effect is as other areas grow, let it be immediately internal to the city or close to the city or out at PuebloPlex, as those businesses start up, there's a lot of indirect businesses that then generate and are created, and they create more jobs. There's an increase in tax base. Your property taxes are affected. You improve your quality of life. Unemployment rates improve. So it's truly a snowball effect. The plan the one thing that I think Dan and I and Matrix really wants to highlight here is this is not our plan. This is your plan. It's a community-based plan. It is going to be a better plan with all of us working together to create it and to develop it. Every single one of you has value added in going forward. And in the past, you know, there's been input in projects across the U.S. They take a lot of input, and we're going to do our very best as we move forward, is as we take your input, that we're going to show you how it's integrated and into the development of the plan. As you go forward, there's always that balancing act of making sure that we're achieving the right amount for all the different stakeholders, and the consensus may be conflicting at times, but we will do our best to find that balance. You heard Russell earlier talk about who is funding this project. This project is funded by the Office of Economic Adjustment, known as OEA. It's part of the Department of Defense. It is a federal grant, and it's about $700,000. You may say that's a lot of money, but there is an immense amount of work that is being done, and there's a lot of consultants that are on the team assisting to provide you as much information as possible on the existing conditions out there, the assessment out there. We're going to do a market study, and just the overall community involvement process is intense as well. We really want to make sure that we integrate all of your input throughout. The OEA, Office of Economic Adjustment, does more than just fund this grant for your community and for PuebloPlex directly. They've also funded other projects, and one of the key projects is the socioeconomic data analysis. And the PuebloPlex.net is a site that we encourage all of you to go visit, and it has all of the data that they collected and analyzed in demographics and market trends, and it's at your fingertips, and it is very valuable information and interesting. It's dashboarded out, and we really welcome all of you to visit that site. So where is the project located? I'm sure many of you do know exactly where PuebloPlex is located. It is approximately 15 miles to the east of the city of Pueblo. It's located right here. This is the part of the Pueblo Chemical Depot is right here, the PCAP. And our study area is the portion that's in the dark gray, as you'll see right in this area here. It's just north of US 50, and it's south of the Transportation Technology Center, and just east of the airport. In communities across the U.S., especially defense communities that have closures in their backyard, there's something called the Golden Triangle for great economic development, and that is where you have a highway system, a solid highway system, an airport, and rail that comes together, and that is one of the core components that assist in economic development, and we have the opportunity to strengthen all three of those here within your community. So what is the project schedule, the timeline? How long is this project for? It is a 12-month project. We're going to complete the project in April of 2016. You'll see here, these are the key phases or tasks that we're going to be addressing as we go forward. There's a lot of subtasks involved in each one of those items that you see here. You heard Dan go through some of the data collection and assessment, and the teams. We've had teams of 4 and 5 out on the site and going through facility and doing assessments, interiors and exteriors and infrastructure. And then we actually still have teams out there looking at the conditions of many of those assets out on the site. The other item I want to highlight is in fall. So stay tuned. You'll be receiving, if you signed in, you'll be receiving emails on when the second workshop will be conducted. We're looking in the fall, early fall actually, and that's where we're going to be presenting different land use alternatives and looking for your input and your guidance and your thoughts on which of the three would be the best, or if it's a hybrid for the preferred land use plan as we move forward. So you've heard me talk about public involvement, and it's not our plan. There are a number of different ways that all of you could continue to stay connected and provide input, and also just check on the status of what we're doing. As Dan said earlier, we have the project website, PuebloPlex Redevelopment Plan.com. But we also have social media with the PuebloPlex Twitter, the PuebloPlex Facebook. We beg you all to please go and like us and to continue to follow us on the PuebloPlex Facebook. And as well, this is the first obvious public workshop of a set of 3 that we're going to be holding. We're going to be developing fact sheets throughout. You have the first one tonight. It's kind of an introduction and project overview, basically the questions that we just highlighted earlier. And there is key components of the public outreach that we try to do as far as notification of public meetings. We did our very best with paid advertisements in the newspaper. We had press releases at the radio, TV stations, newspaper as well, editorials. We did group email blasts across as many different agencies and organizations that we could connect up with at this time. We have a group email list. We actually mailed out a couple hundred postcards as well. So we're doing our very best, and there's a couple questions in the survey later to hear if there's a better way of reaching out to all of you and informing you of what's happening in future public meetings.
Celeste, it might be a good time to get a show of hands in the different categories of folks who are here so we know who we're talking to. If you are a part of the governance, whether that's town or county, city, what have you, would you raise your hand? Okay, great. If you are an interested participant from the community and are just here to participate and learn what we're doing, would you please raise your hand? Oh, look at that. That is tremendous. That's probably 3/4, maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the folks. If you are a economic development entity, whether that's a bank or a private sector funding entity, please raise your hands. Good, because we want to go get those folks later and make sure they fund everything. And they're not here now. This is great. If you're part of the media and you're here to spread the word, please raise your hand. Very good, very good. We want to get some really good press on this, especially articles in the paper, and get in the news as much as we can over the next 12 months or so. And then, of course, if you're a consultant, raise your hand. Oh, yeah, we've got lots of those here to help tonight. Thanks. That gives us a better handle on who we're talking to.
That was a good question, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you. In regards to PuebloPlex proper and the study site that we are looking at throughout the next 12 months, it is filled with an abundance of assets. It's a little less than 16,000 acres. It has over 950 structures. Now, when we say structures, it's more than just a facility that's a building that you could inhabit. A structure could be just a wellhead. So that's a little deceiving on that front. And as we move forward through the existing conditions, and we'll be presenting to you a little later here what we have found in regards to the facilities and the condition of the facilities, to give you a little bit better understanding of what we're talking about. But of those 950 structures, there's approximately about 3.1 million square feet of facilities that we potentially have the opportunity to use, and some we may have to demo depending on the environmental impacts and such. In addition to the facilities, then we have 137 miles of paved roadways, 39 miles of rail that's on site, and of those 39 miles, 10 miles of them are in pretty good condition. They're the key main access between the Transportation Technology Center and down to the Avondale rail line. And then in addition to the structures, there's 620 igloos. Many of those igloos are currently being leased. There's a lot that is actually happening out at Pueblo, and I think at our next meeting what we may do is do just a highlight of what PuebloPlex is doing today and what the successes that are currently happening out there. And it's not just a sleepy little old site that currently exists 15 miles out. Anything else, Dan, that you want to?
It's hard to get a grasp on this, and what the community likes to know is, what does that mean to me? You saw in the picture, this is almost the size of the town of Pueblo itself, but Michael Clarkson's often apt to say that the land area of this site is approximately equal to the city of Miami, Florida, not including the water, but the land area itself. It's actually a little bigger than that. So when you look at it from a challenger's point of view, that's a lot of land to absorb through a plan. So it's probably going to drag out over many, many years, even decades. But when you look at what it can be, there's so much opportunity, and especially with the assets that are on site today.
It is an amazing opportunity. It's in your backyard and it's so close to you, you may not even know. There are communities that would die to have a large developable area that they can master develop, and a good portion of it is developable. The one thing I want to highlight here is, I gotta do this, is the site this is the PCAP site here, which is still the Pueblo Chemical Depot portion, which is also this lagoon here in the cantonment area. You see it's in light gray. That is currently not part of the project to date for the redevelopment plan. And the other items in these green areas are the igloos that we were talking about. There was one other item I wanted to discuss. Oh, so the 16,000 acres that are part of this project, in the future, after the PCAP is completed and not operable, and they have already demilled all of the weapons, the next step would be then to transfer those additional 7,000 acres. So what we're going to do with this redevelopment plan is we're not going to just look at it in a tunnel vision and just look at our site. Even though we are not redeveloping this site, we're going to look at the opportunities, how it could be complementary in nature for future development. So from here on in, we're going to do some real quick highlights of what we have found to date doing our assessment of the existing conditions. You'll see here, this is a site of the county zoning map. Once again, this is our PuebloPlex site. You can see the majority of the zone around PuebloPlex is agricultural, A1, A2. The PuebloPlex itself is currently zoned S1 Public Use District. As we move forward and the land is transferred and development occurs out there, we will need to rezone that property. That is a use for public use only, as it states. There is some sprinklings of the dark brown, which is PUD, planned unit development opportunities. This is a proposed solar array farm, out to just north of Boone, and we have the Avondale area here. And then as we look further, we take zoning, which is existing today, and in the county's regional development plan and their future land use plan, you'll see that they are proposing mostly agricultural to the south of PuebloPlex, and rural ranch is this beige area here, and this is Bureau of Land Management land up to the north. So we said earlier we did a pretty comprehensive assessment of the existing conditions of the facilities.
So we did an on-site assessment of all of the facilities at the PuebloPlex, and what we were looking for at each of the facilities was a variety of different assessed categories, including structural, which is obviously one of the more important ones, environmental, which is obviously an economic driver for development, utilities, electrical. I would like to say we did ADA, but there really is no ADA out on the site, so we just that's basically it. And we looked at any existing HVAC, the infrastructure, and all of this together we kind of categorize into a reuse to help with the planning of the site. We looked at 177 sites, and when I say sites, that means 177 buildings that were actually numbered on the old Pueblo maps. Of those, 47 of them, we just confirmed that they were gone. And we have to do that just to make sure, because you never know with the Army whether it's still existing or if it's gone or if it has been numbered or if it's been changed in number. So we went to all the different sites just to confirm or assess them. 67 of the facilities that we looked at, we consider potential redevelopment facilities. In other words, they're big enough to actually you have future use, or they're in a location that's conducive to future use. So we actually did 67 condition assessments. We did 45 of the 600 igloos as kind of a statistical analysis, and the igloos and the facilities were kind of grouping into two different categories because they're obviously very different as far as development goes and future use. And then 18 of those facilities, as Celeste kind of mentioned, they can only be used for what they are used for now. For instance, a wellhead building, a building that houses a wellhead, you'll never sell that off as anything except a wellhead building. There's a truck weighing station on site, and there's a little tiny building right next to it that recorded the weights. That building can't be used for anything except recording weights of that truck. So those are considered same-use facilities with no technical reuse value. Of the 67 facilities we looked at for future development, right now we have basically thrown them into 4 categories. At this point in time, this is kind of a generalization of the buildings. What might happen is we may, as we get deeper into the assessment and as we compile data and as we compare data to environmental conditions and as we compare data to development conditions, we may end up moving some of these buildings from, for instance, the fair condition category to the poor to the good, based on location of the facilities, redevelopability of the facilities, infrastructure, roads, and things like that. They all play into what the facilities are. But for now, we're looking at 13 buildings that are in poor condition. In other words, they're pretty much not going to be available for reuse, because in trying to renovate them, you're going to run into much more expense than you would have just taking them down and rebuilding them. Fair condition, they're kind of, there may be 50-50 on some of them, where is it worth taking this building down and rebuilding it, or is it worth renovating this building and using it as it exists? The good condition buildings are ones that have some minor upgrades that may need to be done, or that are already being leased out as either warehouse space, or for whatever reason they're being leased out. Those are good. Excellent condition buildings would be buildings that were probably within 10, 15 years old. Obviously, none of them hit that category at this point in time. As you'll notice on the back wall, we have all of these different maps, and at the end of the night, if anybody wants to come up to a map and wants me to kind of explain a little bit more, it basically just shows the buildings as we've categorized them right now. For the warehouses, that's the 500 series where the green is, the 700 series next to it, and then the others, basically they're just expanded out. The igloos are a totally different type of assessment. Like I said, we did 45 igloos. 17 of them we actually went inside and looked at the condition. And these igloos, if you haven't been out there, if anybody has been out there or hasn't been out there, they're super unique facilities. Really great, not even redevelopment, really great reusability right now. These are 28-foot wide by 78-foot long concrete, earthen bermed structures with ventilation that are ideal for the storage of almost anything you can think of. Old cars, boats, campers, files. Because they're concrete lined and they're dry and they're basically climate controlled, there's so many uses for these facilities. It became clear that the basic igloos themselves are similar enough that the only limiting factor is the kind of entrance that are in these facilities. As you can see on the pictures over there, most of the facilities are single blast door facilities. They're 4-foot by 8-foot doors, which is not really very conducive to any kind of storage of equipment. You would basically have to hand carry them in because they're kind of the size of a double door, basically. Then there's the F block basically has 8-foot by 8-foot blast doors, and those are in better condition, 8 feet wide, 8 feet tall. You can start getting things like cars into those. And then the upgraded ones that the PuebloPlex has put in at this point in time are 10-foot by 10-foot garage doors, which obviously are more conducive to storage of bigger type things, the types of things that people would want these igloos for. So when you look at that, in order to go from the top picture, that 4 by 8, to the bottom picture, the 10 by 10, you're looking at about $5,000 per igloo. So that's digging out as you can see, the land is kind of filled in from a lack of use. So you kind of have to dig out a pad area. You have to cut through that 12-inch thick concrete. You have to dispose of that blast door, which is no small feat. And you have to put in a garage door to prep these to get them ready to be actually reused. So that's the significance of the igloos, is basically preparing them for leasing. Again, the map at the back shows the spread. We basically just did a random analysis of the facilities to kind of determine basically the three kinds of entrances.
In addition to the building assessment, obviously one of the things that we have to get a handle on are what are the infrastructure components relative to access to the site, utilities. Those items are very important as it relates to redevelopment opportunities for the property and for the project. The current site access, there's currently 2 access points. There's an interchange on State Highway 50. If you've been out that way, you can miss it because it's an interchange that kind of just sits out there, doesn't have really great signage. And then there's also access on the north side of the site. That's the current access point for the PCAP facilities, and that's the main access point that you get IDs and such. But access for that is provided by the Pueblo DOT road that stretches from the Airport Industrial Park all the way up to the Transportation Technology Center. So that's quite a long drive. As it relates to US 50 and the interchange that's out there today is functionally obsolete, does not meet current DOT or federal highway design standards. And so one of the things that we'll have to take a look at is what opportunities we have to improve the interchange at that location. That will require us working with Colorado DOT, going through their 1601 modification process, basically jumping through hoops to get the interchange approved. There are some interesting geometric concerns related to that, specifically the location of where State Highway 96 ties into State Highway 50. So as we assess access to the site, obviously the existing interchange is something that we'd like to continue to move forward and look to improve, because that's a fairly significant access for the property on the south side of the property, where probably the majority of the redevelopment opportunities will exist. We also have bridges, of course, across State Highway 50 with the interchange. We also have a bridge across the railroad. If any of you have ever dealt with the railroad, dealing with the railroad can be difficult at times. Hopefully nobody here is from the railroad. But the bridge over the railroad has a sufficiency rating. They're rated. CDOT actually does inspections of those bridges every 2 years, and it has a sufficiency rating that's below 50, which basically says, hey, this needs to be replaced. So we've got some pretty significant upfront costs as it relates to site access that we have to tackle. In addition to that, depending upon the redevelopment plans that are developed, we're going to look at other opportunities for access to the site. Obviously, location, 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 access are always important as it relates to redevelopment, and folks that might want to come here to invest significant dollars in a new opportunity or new plant. So we'll be working with the various agencies, the Pueblo County, as well as CDOT on Highway 96 and some of the other county roads to look and see if there's other opportunities for access to the site. Any other access on the south side of the site will require us to obviously work with the railroad and figure out how we're going to cross the railroad as well. From a utility perspective, I guess to sum up, water, sanitary sewer, and electric, most of that goes back to the 1940s. So from a water perspective, cast iron pipes, some transite pipes that has asbestos issues related with them. It's going to require some fairly significant upgrades. Now, our goal as it relates to the utility systems is to try to figure out how to use them. They're being used today. They're being used today by both PuebloPlex, that currently leasing property out there, but it's also being used today by the Army. And we're going to look to leverage that and to make improvements as we need to make improvements, but obviously we can't make all the improvements day one because the project's got to fund itself. So that's the trick that we're going to have to solve, and we're doing a lot of investigation on all of these utility systems. From a water perspective, the site is served by Well, there are 11 wells that are permitted at the site. The wells were decreed in 1942. That sounds like a long time ago. It was a long time ago, but as it relates to water rights, that was not very long ago. Based on the lawsuit that Kansas v. Colorado, Kansas won, and of course all of the water rights within the Arkansas Basin were reallocated. And I've been told by the water engineer that any well that's in the Arkansas Basin that's after about 1906 really is not in priority. And so that means at any point in time, if it's not augmented and you don't have augmentation water, you could actually not be able to pump. So one of the issues that we're going to have to tackle early on, and we're looking at various alternatives to bring additional water to the site based upon the development needs. And that is going to be one of the challenges for development, will be bringing that water to the site, something that is reliable, something that is, can be augmented, and so on and so forth. We've had a number of meetings with different suppliers, and we're making progress along those lines. Sanitary sewer treatment. Currently, the sanitary sewer treatment at the site are evaporative lagoons. And so that's another thing that, from a phasing perspective, working with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for permitting, we'll have to go through them to look at the different alternatives, whether we look at providing some additional secondary treatment and using the evaporative lagoons, building a package treatment plant. So those are all other options that we're looking at today. The current sanitary sewer system is vitrified clay. That was very widely used in the 40s. It's not used today. Obviously, today we use primarily PVC. So that'll be something else that upgrades will have to be made as development moves forward. Electric, built in the 1940s. There's one substation on site. That is another item that we'll have to look to make some investments. Currently, the Army buys wholesale power, and it's delivered to the site through, I think, Excel, or maybe it's Black Hills. That is something, we're in Black Hills territory, and so we'll need to work with Black Hills Energy to develop a plan, so as we build out, we can bring that electric infrastructure needed for the industrial type uses that we're looking at for the site. Gas is supplied by Excel, and actually we're in pretty good shape as it relates to gas. There's a 6-inch main that comes to the property, which is a pretty good size gas main, and a couple regulation stations. So we've collected a lot of data for the engineering geeks of us, which there's a couple of us in the room. Lori is here. There she is. You know, we got to go collect all these old plans and whatnot, and it's pretty cool to get plans that were signed and delivered in 1942, and I had to sign with my life as I took them away, and we made copies of them. But we've done a great job of collecting all of this data and going through the assessment, and now the next item we'll be working on going forward will be marrying the infrastructure needs for the site with the redevelopment plan so that we can move development forward.
Well, if you're not an engineer by now, we're going to get you registered by the end of tonight. So there'll be a test, and Eric will be doing it. Now, I want to go quickly. Eric mentioned one of the most important aspects, water. There are limiting factors and challenges. The other big challenge on all of these programs is always the environmental assessment. The Department of Defense is required to do an ECP, an environmental condition of the property report, and our job is to study it and find gaps and holes in it that relate to the redevelopment of the property. The categories that they use are always related to the existing use, and the good news here is we believe the property is going to redevelop from a perspective of a similar type of a development. It's going to be an industrial complex. It's going to have, there won't be a lot of housing in it, although it may generate housing outside of the site. There are constraints like existing land use controls that are on the property right now that will need to be looked at and worked into the planning. There's a cleanup schedule that the Army is following through the Corps of Engineers out of Omaha Some of that work will be completed by the Corps. Maybe some of that work will be moved over in a privatized sense and put some of the control and maybe some early job generation here in Pueblo related to cleaning the property before it can be redeveloped. Last, this data gap analysis is very important because, like I said earlier, the Army's only required to clean it to existing use under something that's known as CERCLA, which is a big environmental law that's been passed by Congress, whereas local users will be held to a more strict standard that's applied by your state regulators, CDPHE, and we have to make sure we categorize those changes and those differences, and then we price them appropriately going forward for the planning purposes. I'm excited about getting forward, moving this process forward and getting into the planning assessment and some of the questions that we're going to be asking. If you have questions about the environmental, we've got very sharp people in the room, including Brandis Esslinger, who's helping us with the environmental constraints, and I invite you to ask us as we go through it at your specific site or your specific location when you're doing your plan at the table.
So if you take everything that we just looked at, and you specifically just look at the PuebloPlex site, this is a very, very preliminary look at what we call opportunities and constraints of just the site, mostly natural and some physical constraints. You'll see we looked at environmental, drainage, surface, slopes over 20%, access and egress. And many of those items we illustrated here on the map. And if they're in a different color other than purple, those are areas that currently cannot be developed due to some type of impact, i.e. environmental, physical, or natural. So everything in the purple then is potential developable land. And so let's take that one step further. Just because there are areas that are not purple today does not mean that they will not be developable in the future. And you just heard Dan talk about that the Omaha Corps of Engineers is going through some cleanup, and they're going to be addressing some of these areas, and there's opportunities for additional cleanup in the future that will provide a bigger developable footprint. The opportunities of the unencumbered land then, as I stated, are in the purple. So
Now the fun.
now the fun. Everybody should have one of the remote polling devices. If you don't, please raise your hand. We'll get you one. Good. First one's fairly easy. So, please identify where you live. So over 60% are from the city of Pueblo, followed by 19% Pueblo County, and then we have a few in Avondale, 10% Boone, and a few in the other. So where did you hear about this meeting? So newspaper, number one, 51%, followed by email, which is great to hear. So we will definitely continue to go forward with that. And then, of course, we always are curious about others. Sometimes that's word of mouth. If you are one of those people who did select other, please, if you are willing to see us later, and if there's a way that is a means that is great for us to get the notification out to you specifically, we'll be happy to do that. So how familiar are you with the PuebloPlex site and the facilities? Excellent. So 37% said very familiar, so it's about a third, a third, a third. Very familiar, familiar, and somewhat familiar. So this is a question that you have the opportunity to select two. So the last two that you hit will be the two that are calculated in the results. What are the key advantages for development at PuebloPlex? That's across the board. We have existing facilities, the access to rail, followed by I-25 access and land cost, low land cost. But all of those are really important components to the opportunities.
Maybe somebody knows more about the
there.
land cost than we do at this point.
In terms of potential market sector opportunities, which of the following have the most potential? Please select three. Okay. Looks like light and heavy industrial development, warehousing and distribution, as well as alternative energy are the anywhere between 18 and 24%. Do you feel the Pueblo chemical Agent Destruction Pilot Plant, the PCAP, is an asset, a liability, or a liability in terms of redevelopment at PuebloPlex. So we have short-term liability, long-term asset, as well as an asset. We would agree.
Well-informed crowd.
Yeah, we would agree.
Crowd.
Which is the best way to alleviate negative impressions of the Pueblo Chemical Depot? Create new businesses on site, as well as better promotion of positive aspects. And we just put a few of those opportunities, ads, site tours, and really just educating the community on what's happening out at Pueblo and all the great opportunities that it provides the community as a whole. So how would you prioritize the improvements needed to attract business as well as developers? And this is an opportunity to select 2 answers. Looks like B, improve water and sewer infrastructure was the highest at 31%, followed by improve access and roads, as well as clean up environmental hazards. So what is the best method to notify you about future public engagement opportunities? So email followed by newspaper, and we will definitely continue to do both of those as well as some of the other ones
Some
as
Facebook
well.
users out there too.
Yes. Oh, there are? Yes, there are. Social media. So that was our passive exercise. What we like to do now is you'll see at each table there are maps, and there's some comment cards, and there's one of the Matrix team facilitators who are there. But before we get started in this next exercise, we'd like to see if there's any questions. So we have a question in the back, sir. We're going to bring the mic back to you.
In one of the early slides, there was a mention of homeless submission. Is that some sort of requirement from the federal government?
The homeless submission, when you obtain federal property, which is built over time using tax dollars, there's a requirement, there's an act created in Congress to take a look at the less fortunate folks. Among them would be the homeless. Among them would be folks who are in need of the continuum of care, transitional housing. Those are all requirements of the redevelopment plan as a social regulator to ensure that if those folks are in the community, that they're being looked at and being taken care of, considering that a lot of the investment in the property over all the years that it's been in use has been applied through federal funds and through taxes and the reinvestment of taxes. So it's an act that was required. It was originally the McKinney Act, if you want to look that up. And then it's been modified in the Defense Authorization Act several times over the years here.
So John, just to follow up on that, we've outreached to homeless organizations here in the community. We have 2 groups that have interest in using igloos for storage of supplies, cots, foods, what have you, and it's our intention to provide those igloos to those 2 homeless serving organizations here locally.
How are you?
Does the grant money, is that just good for this year, for that year of the project that's
Not necessarily.
So the grant that we received, actually it was awarded to us late last year, will be the first in a series of grants that OEA will provide the Pueblo community for the redevelopment planning and the implementation of the redevelopment plan. So we will likely be partially funded through Army and or DoD grants for the next decade. However, it's certainly important for us to monetize this project early on so that it can be self-sufficient sooner rather than later. As you witnessed tonight, there's a lot of upfront expenses related to this development. So the sooner that we can ramp this project up, get businesses located, at the depot, the better off we will be, because eventually we will be weaned off federal support.
And I'd only add one comment, that the Office of Economic Adjustment does this for all the communities that are affected by base closure and realignment around the country. And we've seen a trend where if a base is significantly in need, as Russell has said, the funding stream can go as long as a decade or more, and it'll reach into several millions of dollars of input. Question?
So there was comments about the igloos and the retrofitting of the larger doors and making those available for lease. Is PuebloPlex leasing those today?
Those igloos are available for lease today. So we have, the single door igloos, the double door igloos, and then the 10 by 10s, and we have nearly 200 of the igloos currently rented today. It's one of the largest sources of income that we have for our organization. At some point, as we go through this planning process, we will explore the viability of selling those igloos to the community on a onesie-twosie basis or as a bulk sale to a larger manufacturer or somebody that may have need for that type of climate-controlled storage. But they are available today.
I'm Michael Clarkson with the PuebloPlex. I was just going to share that if you're on the Comcast cable system, you'll actually see our commercials currently running, currently in the market out here.
Always the marketer.
Is it possible to to go ahead and use the existing infrastructure, and then when PCAP is finished, to switch over into the water and sewer treatment facilities that they built for that, as well as a substation that's next to the facility?
Actually, I'll address that. We attempt to use existing infrastructure to the maximum degree that it is possible. Through our site assessments and our infrastructure assessments, we have been very cautious about what can be reused. On an interim basis, yes, there will be opportunities to maybe get some early wins with existing infrastructure, but in sites that were built in 1942 and have failed to get enough support over time through the Department of Defense, typically those systems degrade so quickly that new infrastructure is probably more apparent and appropriate. Now, I will tell you that when infrastructure is rebuilt, it's not always funded by the community, certainly not always funded by the Department of Defense. Developers who have interest in this property will build that into their pro forma and will build infrastructure to service their needs often, especially when it's an industrial complex. So yes, the PCAP has the most recent and relevant and new infrastructure, and that will certainly be used as we go forward and when that property becomes made available. In the interim, we'll have a tough time servicing any major user with the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, has the idea been couched to the military of, hey, you want to release this and store some of your material here?
You know, that is a great question, and that idea in general across the United States has been asked by many, many communities that are losing Department of Defense jobs, Department of Defense finance and money into those communities. I think the answer is yes, that they would do that. They have been asked, but there's an unlimited amount of opportunity for that all around the country. So the odds of getting what's called a lease back in a place where there's a mission that's going away is very limited and probably not likely in this location. Yes, it has been done. Leasebacks and enhanced use leases are very common in the redevelopment of former base sites.
There's a lady over here. Why don't we go to this lady here, and then there's gentlemen in the back, two gentlemen, I believe, who have questions. And then, sir, did you have a question? Okay, you just have.
So the $700,000 is the first grant, and Russell said there'll probably be more. Does any of that come back to the community, or is that all outside services?
I'm going to let Russell answer it, but I will tell you that a lot of our consultants live and work in the community as well as the Matrix folks. Those dollars that are coming out to those folks on our team, a lot of that is being spent in the community. However, as you go forward, there'll be a different approach, maybe some of the same approach as well.
So the total amount, Jane, of the first grant that we've received is closer to $1.2 million. $705,000 has been allocated for this redevelopment planning effort and infrastructure analysis and the homeless submission documents. So there's lots of local folks working on that that project. In addition, there's additional money in that grant for salaries for staff. We just hired a few new people to help support our activities and support the Matrix team. So we have folks that are living and working here in Pueblo at the depot. And then there's other dollars for some software enhancements relating to property management and maintenance software that we'll be acquiring to help us manage this immense project moving forward. So that's really the corpus of the funds of this first tranche of grant money that we've received. We'll start another grant application likely in late August, early September. We'll need to do some more environmental assessment. We'll need to do some more infrastructure assessment and an infrastructure master plan. So it's our intention to try to do as much locally as possible. The challenge is that a lot of the expertise in this type of infrastructure of this size is outside of our immediate community, unfortunately. The other thing that we'll be working on in the next phase is our business plan and our pro forma, which is going to be our guiding document moving forward as to, once we understand what we have here, we understand what the community wants this property to look like in the future, we then have to figure out how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to do it. And so DOD will help us with monies to put that plan together as well. So, I'm a Pueblo person, born and raised, and I want to do all we can to keep as many jobs here in Pueblo as possible. That's, our sole mission is to create jobs. So the grant funding moving forward will help us with that. There will also be grant money, and we call it a caretaker agreement that we're negotiating with the Army that will allow us to take over a lot of the maintenance activities that the Army is currently doing at the depot. That will create, maybe a dozen or so jobs that will be under the PuebloPlex banner moving forward until we actually transition and take ownership of all of this property. So good point, but hopefully that answers your question.
Is that okay?
I know that y'all meet in a room somewhere and discuss stuff. Now, who from the city is involved in these meetings with y'all? So, any of the council members there, or is Petco there, or when you guys sit and discuss all this?
We've already presented at Petco at one of their monthly meetings, and it was more of a public luncheon where a lot of that input was made. However, there will be input on a continuous basis from all of the stakeholders. In terms of in closed rooms, I sense that you were thinking this is a black box kind of a thing.
So excellent questions. We have a community-based board of directors. Our organization, PuebloPlex, was formed by the Colorado legislature in 1994. So 3 of our board members are appointed by city council, and we have 1 active city council person serving on our board. We have 3 members of our board of directors appointed by the county commissioners, and we have 1 current county commissioner serving on our board. We also have 1 board member that's a joint appointment between city council and the county commissioners. We meet in public once a month on the 3rd Thursday at the DA's office. So at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll be having an open public board meeting, and that's where we discuss, the negotiations as to who to hire, what the challenges that we're having in working through this process and with the Army. So all of that has taken place in a very public setting. We have some of our board members in the room tonight, but they're all community-based, and all the decisions relating to this property moving forward and the future reuse will be made by our board of directors in consultation with the city and the county, and of course PEDCO, with whom we work with very closely.
Partial answer to the question. I'm Ken Conyers with Matrix. I'm also on the PEDCO board. I've been on the board of directors for about 12 years now. PEDCO is definitely involved in this. Jack Rink, our president, CEO, has been involved in the meetings. From the city, we've had Scott Hobson with planning, Earl Wilkinson from Public Works, Pepper Whitliff from traffic. From the county, we've had Chris Markison, we had Joan Armstrong from planning. So we've been as inclusive as we can, particularly with the technical people. And we're relying on them to go back to the elected officials and keep them informed. But we want to make sure that we get all of the technical expertise locally that we can glom onto.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you very much. Question I just had is, and it may have been answered previous, I was late coming in, but the actual PuebloPlex, is that going to stay under PuebloPlex and properties leased out, or is that going to be available for subdivision to various others, private corporations or whatever?
You know, we will be developing socioeconomic data and highest and best use, which will provide for private sector investment opportunities. But there's an overall scheme that will be developed in terms of that redevelopment, and the champion of that scheme and the man who will be directing that redevelopment over there, as long as he remains as the executive director, is Russell. So perhaps you want to address that.
So it's our intention to sell property. You know, we want this property back on the tax rolls. So some of it may be appropriate for grazing opportunities. Other portions of the property may be available for manufacturing, distribution, law enforcement training, renewable energy. But it's our intention to get the property back into private sector hands, because that's where the county and the citizenry of Pueblo County can benefit the most from this property. So it is not our intention to hold it and be forever. You know, it's my intention to work ourselves out of a job sooner rather than later.
I was wondering if there are in the works components for partnerships with our educational institutions, the university, community college, or school districts. There seem to be trending more and more think tanks or industrial practice areas, things like that with their universities that aren't necessarily short-term revenue generators, but they are long-term investments in the community and keeping talent, which is homegrown, in the community that could further sort of move that snowball along.
Russell, you get all the hard questions.
I know. Russell, come over here.
So the answer is yes, Mel. You know, we're currently working with PCC on a program for heavy equipment operators at the depot to do training and actually real-life excavation in certain portions of the depot, working with the university and their facilities management department and engineering students to come out and actually, you know, have some real hands-on teaching. One of the other ideas that we're floating around right now is a manufacturing incubator where we have lots of personal property that the Army has given to the community, such as fully functional machine shop. And so it's our intention to explore the opportunity of doing, in addition to a manufacturing incubator. So I think there are some opportunities. Quite honestly, we haven't gotten to that point in our engagement yet to interact with the two local school districts yet, but I would welcome that conversation.
Here you go.
Yeah, Russell or Dan, in helping frame the vision of what's possible with an asset like this, what are some examples that you could point us to of successful redevelopment efforts of similarly situated facilities elsewhere in the country?
It's a great question, and it's a question that we want to mollify by answering it in a way that may not satisfy you completely, because many of these properties are 30 to 50 year development horizons. However, when we were interviewed for this work, we've worked at several very similar properties, and one that comes to mind would be in Clinton, Indiana. It was the Newport Chemical Depot, so it even has the same terminology in terms of name. It was also operated by the Army, and we worked on that project for several years, and currently it's under development. There's a private sector entity known as Clean Coal Company who's operating a site there. It's one of the things we presented in our interview, and it's in a certain state right now of redevelopment, and it's generally viewed as very successful. Another similar property in terms of size, acreage, 13,727 acres, it was the Kansas Army Ammunition Plant, which is in Parsons, Kansas, which similarly has 35 miles of rail, has an operating short rail line going there. We worked from the mid-2000s to today on that project. It's currently redeveloping and has multiple opportunities, including an energy plant site for cogeneration or trigeneration. The rail service is obviously in there where they're using rail car storage to generate revenue. They've got several leasing opportunities, a lot of land grazing opportunities that Russell had mentioned earlier in terms of agriculture in the near term until that site becomes more viable. These projects that are going now are the hardest projects in the base realignment enclosure arena. The military got rid of all the easy projects starting in 1988, and we have had 5 rounds of closures since that period. So the low-hanging fruit for economic development in major areas has been taking place all over the country. Even in Colorado, you might look at the Lowry redevelopment up in Denver, which we worked on as well, was generating about $750 million of offshoot economy when the Air Force was operating. Now it's over $2 billion of annual economic input in the redeveloped condition. Each one of these sites is unique, so there is none that are exactly like this one. The ones I mentioned earlier were very successful, and they're more like this one than some of the more urban-centered sites. But I'll tell you that the opportunity and the challenges in nearly every case are overcome with some form of economic advancement and some form of job creation. This property is being looked at by major industries around the country because of some of the attributes we talked about earlier, including its ability to be away from a major population center. A lot of industrial complex doesn't want to be located right up against housing areas, for example. Celeste mentioned the triumvirate, your airport, your rail, and your highway. Those are great attractors that don't attract the same kind of development that you see in an urban-centered area. So some of the detriments are the size of the property and the lack of population, but some of the attractors are that very isolation and the fact that you've got great access, rail and highway and air as well. There are numerous others. I mean, I could go on all night. We've been doing this, like I said, since 1984, and probably 150 to 200 properties we've worked on in this arena around the country. Many of them are completely turned over and redeveloped in communities around the United States. In fact, Russell, I don't know if you want to add, because I know you visited quite a few of the success stories, as well as some of the less successful ones. What was your opinion of the opportunity?
Well, and like Dan said, a lot of the industrial sites are fairly new to the BRAC world. They were slated for closure in 2005. They basically went to the Redevelopment Authority in 2011, 2012. So a lot of the success remains to be seen, but the Clinton, Indiana facility is one that's a model that we've looked at. We're also going to Fort Chaffee in Arkansas, which is a hugely successful medical facility and lots of commerce taking place. But there are some challenges with sites like ours that are more rural in nature and not surrounded by the city and county of Denver and Aurora, such as the Lowry site in Denver. So we have our work cut out for us, but there are lots of success stories around the country.
Yeah, I'm here to represent a homeless group, the Pueblo Rescue Mission, and I just want to ask you, is the homeless thing on there just kind of a window decoration, or are you serious about really starting some work-study programs and so forth there?
Well, I'd just like to say that, no, it's not window dressing ever in any of these projects. And as I said earlier, you know the investment that's been made by the federal government in the property, and we all have a social need and a social obligation to take care of these issues. And I'm happy that you're here. It's always good to see someone who's dedicated their time and their efforts to helping those less fortunate. I will say that it's an obligation in terms of the process. It's certainly not window dressing, and I was wondering, would you like to address more on that?
Obviously, we've outreached, to the homeless organizations. We've had numerous meetings. So likely in the August-September timeframe, our attorney, Chris Turner, will be working with the Matrix Design Group and getting with you. We have to put together a legally binding agreement with the two organizations that expressed interest for, a transitional work environment and or the igloo space. So that'll all be coming up in the next 60 days or so.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is this, all of this land kind of an all or nothing with the significant environmental challenges in part of it? I'm not sure does the county take over, PuebloPlex or whatever, but is it all or nothing, or can you just not accept those things that are problematic?
In base realignment and closure, it's always a negotiation until the actual transfer happens. And there's a lot of alphabet soup around that. You do not have an obligation as a community to take the property. And I had the opportunity to present to Congress on lessons learned. And we had suggested that there may be places around the country where the economic return is going to be so poor that the property is not worth the value that the community would get for it. And in those cases, we said perhaps the government has to look at how they can subsidize, create opportunities of capital infusion, for example, privatizing the cleanup of the site, to create an economic turn so that the property is worth more in the eyes of industry. Our job will be to blend the assets that we talked about today with the economics that we haven't completed yet in terms of looking at the market study and what are the attractors going to be. And then looking at that very question, the second part of the question is how much is required to get the property. In a lot of cases, the departments are looking for a return. Sometimes they allow for something called a zero-cost transfer if the property is valueless. The environmental question you ask is a very, very challenging question. I mentioned earlier the environmental condition of the property report. It's kind of like the department's first assessment of what problems exist from an environmental perspective. Our job is to look at that and with a critical eye and make sure that the things that are really nasty out there are being taken care of and that the funding is available to complete that so that it can be transferred. One of the alphabet soups that I just mentioned is called a FOST, which stands for a Finding of Suitability to Transfer. And the Department of Defense cannot get a FOST unless they've achieved the goals that are embedded in the Act, CERCLA, for cleanup to the existing use. So there's a lot of things that will have to happen before a FOST is had here and before property can transfer. Celeste showed you a map that had purple on it. The Army right now, that's the Army's position, that's not our position. The Army's position is that all that purple land is available for transfer right now at this time. We can't say yes or no to that until we're done with our job, which is looking at both the infrastructure, the environmental constraints, their environmental condition of the property report, and probably shooting a little bit of holes in it and making sure that the property is safe for human health and the environment as the property goes forward from here. I will mention one more thing before I turn over the mic. There's something called a Finding of Suitability for Early Transfer. That's called a FOSET. And earlier when I said, you know, how do we create early jobs? If we're fortunate enough to have the department decide that they would infuse this project with capital and allow for a FOSET to transfer the property before it's clean, then all the dollars that would be spent on cleaning it would come back to this community in the way of jobs and on-site cleanup activities. That might be an opportunity here early on. But the hard question that you asked about, do you always want to take the property? We've seen places around the country where the property is not taken for any number of reasons, and environmental is most often the cause for the lack of that transfer. Russell, did you want to add to that?
So, excellent question. And the answer is, one of the outcomes of this planning effort might be, we can't make this work. It's going to be too expensive, it's going to be too much of a challenge, and we'll have to make those tough decisions as a community moving forward. So, you know, it's our intention now to take all of the property because, quite frankly, it's here. And so I would prefer, and I think the community would prefer, that we're in charge or have a say in what this property is going to be used for moving forward, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of DOD and we don't know what's going to happen and we're going to have substantial rural blight out there. So, you know, I think we would lean more toward taking it and just keeping certain portions of it fenced off and monitored in perpetuity rather than just giving it back to the Army per se. But that's all to be seen as we go through this redevelopment planning process. So excellent question.
I'd like to certainly answer any other dying questions here, but I do want to get to our exercise because although you don't know much about the site, it's important for us to learn what your thought processes are and get them down on paper. But are there any other questions that we'd like to address before we get into the exercise? Okay, if you're not sitting at a table, and you want to participate in this planning exercise, find a seat at the table or even feel free to stand around behind one of these tables that have plans on them. Before we go on, I want to introduce the folks who will be addressing each of the tables. Tim Dries, are you going to talk us through the process we're about to handle here?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm pretty impressed with the number of questions and the quality of questions from this group. Usually when we go to a public meeting, we're hard pressed to get people to talk at all. And you've brought up some great issues and asked some great questions. So thank you for that. So what we'd like to do now is hear more from you, but in a graphic form and noted form on these maps we have at each table. We're going to, each matrix person will be at a table to help you come up with some ideas and issues and concerns that you might have about redevelopment of the base. So 2 things we'd like to hear from you. What do you know about the base and the surrounding area in terms of any issues and concerns? And then second of all, what are some of the uses that you think might be appropriate on the base? How might they occur on the base, such as access, types of uses, areas to avoid, those kinds of issues, and we'll just write them on the map, and then we'll take those with us as part of our evaluation process. We were hoping to have time to present your findings at the end of this, but the time is running short, so we will just write down as many issues and concerns, ideas, and thoughts that you might have, and we'll go from there.
I guess a question was asked earlier, is this just an exercise or does this information really count? Do my ideas matter? What I'd like to do as a wrap-up here at the end is have either one of the Matrix folks or somebody from the table stand up and give us 1 or 2 or 3 of the very important ideas that you developed in your workshop here, even though it was a mini workshop for a short period of time, around the table. I'd like all of us to listen to that, and no pressure here. Just let's get some ideas out and see how you all did so we don't run too far into the evening here. Tim, I'm going to let you lead.
All right, we'll have, you want to just talk about the big idea? Real quick, though, not detailed.
My name's Mike Carter, and I mean, I kind of had a dog in this hunt to begin with because my kids and my family, my kids and my family grew up riding motorcycles in the dirt around here, around the prairies. We see the troubles that have happened at PMI. That was a very popular spot for people to ride their motorcycles and do off-road riding and that sort of thing. And because of the proximity to all the new development over there, this seemed like a very good location for at least some sort of off-road riding facility, whether it's motocross or limited trail riding and that kind of thing. So we've been thinking about it and thought we'd throw that out there.
Just add one other thing. One of the opportunities here would be on the steeper slopes. So it's not like it's a use that needs to use the flat slopes and the warehouses and the roads. It's an area, or it's an activity that would use those areas that are not otherwise developable. Okay?
That's outstanding. If you get a chance and you got a list of things, feel free to espouse on them. Eric?
So I did a horrible job because half my table left. Absolutely, absolutely. So we had some discussion about alternative energy and solar arrays. Obviously, there's a lot of property, and so there's a lot of opportunities to put solar arrays and the like on site.
Well, we talked about research opportunities, explosive research, railroad research, working with the tech center, recycling, archaeology sites along that creek on the west side of the property. We also talked solar, but man, if we put solar panels across 16,000 acres, we'd need maybe a dozen employees. It doesn't generate a lot of employment.
Outstanding. Let's go back here, and I'm hoping there isn't, you going to represent, Ken?
Let's see. We won't repeat because we had some of the same ideas, but a movie soundstat and Elon Musk, need to get him involved. So,
Anybody with deep pockets, right? We need some investment money here. All right, Celeste? The gentleman from Bechtel.
We talked about the importance of bringing PCAP into the development and using the infrastructure that they've already built to be able to use it and expand it into the redevelopment area. We also talked about recycling areas, different types, whether they be plastic, paper, rugs, things like that. I'm from Florida, and right outside of Orlando, over on Cocoa Beach side. So when I looked at this originally, and I saw that we had 7,000 plus 16,000, it just so happens that that matches Disney World's footprint of 25,000 square feet. So, and Disney World started in the 70s. So it took, and at the time, Orlando was about 10,000 people. And now it's the #1 tourist attraction in the world, but it took 50 years to get there. So what I'm saying is obviously, well, maybe we do want to do a Disney World, but which would be nice. But it's going to take time. You know, whatever this development is, it's going to take time. So.
Big ideas, big vision. I agree. Yeah. This table, Lori? No? You going to lead them? Here, Bob?
Little child will lead them. Anyway, we're the ones that want to help the homeless, but we also want to help Pueblo. And anything we do here will be with a corporation that makes money for Pueblo. We'll have to come alongside, and we'll be the employed ones. But we looked at one of the smaller warehouses, and we're thinking about recycling. We're also thinking about a bicycle thing and a bunch of other ideas to come along, but we'll have to have a corporation to come alongside us that wants, no other way to say it, cheap labor. And we have the people that we'll have to train, but it will get them off the street. They'll have a job. They'll be able to get their first and last month's rent together, and they will become productive citizens. We'll have to have training, but to go in and do some of the early stuff, but then we'll move them on to other things, and hopefully even some of your corporations, we can help you with that.
And we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Childress here, who actually lived on the PuebloPlex property, back in 1947, had a home along near the officers' quarters there. He's got an idea of developing eventually some residential up on the plateau so they have an overlook of the rest of the site. He actually really thought outside of the box, where he went south of Highway 50, where Chico Creek comes into the Arkansas River, and he thinks that maybe a reservoir in that area might be a very good recreational attraction that would help bring people towards this area too. And then this is another very outside the box thought, developing the igloos into homes. That was a big thing I know back in the 70s and 80s. Underground homes are energy efficient. This is a lot of square footage we're talking about, and there may be a potential for eventually developing igloos as homes and maybe even helping out the homeless.
Very good, outstanding, out-of-the-box ideas. Do you want to present?
Sure. Our group had a list that was very similar to a lot of the others. A lot of the mountain bike trails and that whole community, looking at even the Velo course, tie in with the Olympic Training Center in terms of the speed skating that was out there. One that I really liked that Greg came up with is the open air market, something that would kind of appeal to all the employees you might have out there, all the recreational users that would be out there. That could be supplying any food, equipment, even having just the market for just kind of the crafts and all the entrepreneurs. Yeah, kind of the Santa Fe open air market that people could come out here and kind of create a little city during the day. What are some of the others? Oh, on the igloos, food production. If you could bring, water and electricity to those, they'd be protected from any kind of the elements. So that's a great use for a lot of the igloos. Maybe putting some ponds, some of these drainage areas, if there could be ponds, fishing, and some recreational uses there. Definitely the wind and solar. And Did I forget anything? Oh, there was talk about a data center. If the right amount of fiber optic and bandwidth was out there, that would also work. So,
Thank you, Mark. Outstanding. One more table back here. I don't know who wants to represent. Brandis? Chris? Chris, what do you got for us?
We talked about a lot of the ideas that folks had already discussed, a lot of the renewable energy ideas. I won't repeat them, but one thing that I do think is worth further exploration is the fact that National Renewable Energy Lab is located in Colorado, and there could be a potential partnership across a variety of dimensions for having an area like this available for further research and development efforts associated with alternative energy. The fact that we also talked about using the existing infrastructure that's out there now as a feeder, so to speak, a way of getting revenue in the door early, kind of like what Russell was talking about at the beginning. And then as we're using that to attract and build out existing infrastructure, then we'll be able to get more and more advanced companies, more in the manufacturing space, and possibly even due to the altitude of this location, it might even be suitable for a potential rocket launch site as you have more and more commercial space exploration activities that are taking place. So those are just some of the other things that I haven't heard discussed earlier. Did I miss anything, Brandis?
Well, thank you all very much. To do a closing here, I'd like to turn to our fearless leader with all the tremendous ideas and great power in the community. So, Russell. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Stay tuned. We're going to be driving conversation in the community over the next few years relating to this project. So again, thank you for being here at our very first meeting, and have a wonderful evening.